Before you scroll away, let me ask you something. Have you ever judged someone in just 3 seconds, and then realized you were completely wrong? Stay with me, because by the end of this story, you might look at people a little differently. And if stories like this touch your heart, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel, because moments like this deserve to be shared with the world. The stage lights of America's Got Talent burned bright that night, casting long shadows across the glossy floor. The audience buzzed with anticipation. Simon Cowell sat with his usual composed expression, arms folded, eyes sharp, ready to critique. He had seen everything. Incredible singers. Terrible singers. Dreamers. Delusions. Nothing surprised him anymore. Or so he thought. From backstage, a young man stood quietly, adjusting the collar of his slightly oversized suit. His name was Mateo Reyes, a 27-year-old from Cebu, Philippines. His hands trembled, not from fear of the judges, but from the weight of the journey that brought him there. Back home, Mateo worked long days delivering parcels on an old motorbike that coughed more than it ran. He sang Elvis Presley songs while riding through the crowded streets of Cebu, imagining the roar of a real audience instead of honking jeepneys. His father, once a guitarist in a small provincial band, had passed away years earlier, leaving behind only an old vinyl record of Elvis's greatest hits and a dream that never had the chance to grow. Mateo used to sit beside his father as a child, watching him close his eyes and strum along to Can't Help Falling in Love. Music, his father would whisper, is not about being famous. It's about making someone feel less alone. When his father died, the house grew quiet. Bills piled up. Mateo left school early to work. The dream of singing on a big stage seemed selfish compared to feeding his mother and younger sister. So he kept the dream hidden, singing only at small local fiestas and karaoke nights where people clapped politely and then went back to their drinks. One evening, a tourist recorded Mateo singing Suspicious Minds at a roadside eatery and posted it online. The video spread quietly at first, then rapidly. Comments flooded in. "This guy sounds like Elvis reborn. Go to AGT. You deserve the world." Mateo laughed it off. But his sister didn't. She filled out the audition form without telling him. Weeks later, an email arrived. Now here he was, thousands of miles from home, standing behind the curtain. When his name was called, Mateo stepped onto the massive AGT stage. The applause was polite but uncertain. He looked small under the lights. His accent was thick when he spoke. "Hello," Simon said, leaning forward slightly. "What's your name?" "Mateo Reyes, sir." "And where are you from?" "Cebu, Philippines." The crowd cheered warmly. Simon gave a tight smile. "And what will you be singing?" Mateo swallowed. "An Elvis Presley song." There it was, a flicker. A tiny shift in Simon's expression. Elvis songs were dangerous territory. Too many had tried. Too many had failed. Covers of legends often ended careers before they began. Simon nodded slowly. "Okay. Let's see." The music began. A single soft guitar intro. Mateo closed his eyes. "Wise men say." The first note floated gently across the theater, smooth, controlled, rich with warmth. The audience straightened in their seats. It wasn't an imitation. It wasn't exaggerated. It was honest. His voice carried a texture that felt lived in, like it had traveled through storms before reaching this stage. Simon's eyebrow lifted. Mateo stepped closer to the mic. His nervousness melted away. In that moment, he wasn't a delivery driver. He wasn't a struggling son trying to make ends meet. He was just a voice telling a story. "But I can't help falling in love with you." A woman in the audience wiped her eyes. The camera cut to Simon, who was no longer leaning back. His arms had uncrossed. As the song built, Mateo's voice soared, not loudly, not dramatically, but with controlled passion. Every word felt like it carried his father's memory. Every note felt like a tribute. By the final chorus, the theater had gone completely silent. No coughs. No whispers. Just breath held in thousands of chests. Then the last note lingered in the air, delicate and trembling. Silence. And then the entire audience erupted. A standing ovation thundered through the auditorium. Mateo blinked in disbelief. He stepped back, overwhelmed, as the crowd continued cheering. Simon remained seated for 2 seconds longer than the others. Then he stood. The crowd grew even louder. When the noise settled, Simon leaned toward his microphone. "Mateo," he said carefully, "I've heard that song more times than I can count. And I usually dread it." The audience laughed softly. "But that was beautiful. You didn't try to be Elvis. You were you. And that's why it worked." Mateo's eyes filled with tears. Sophia wiped her cheeks. "Your voice feels like home," she said. Heidi smiled warmly. It was pure. Howie added, "You made this entire room feel something." Simon looked at Mateo again, this time not as a judge, but as someone who had just witnessed authenticity. "Sometimes," Simon continued, "people walk onto this stage with big voices and big egos. You walked in with humility. And you left us speechless." Mateo covered his face, trying to contain the flood of emotion. Back in Cebu, his mother and sister were watching from a neighbor's small television, holding hands so tightly their knuckles turned white. Simon nodded toward the panel. "Let's vote." One by one, the judges gave their yes. When Simon's turn came, he paused for dramatic effect. "Mateo Reyes, this is a very big yes." The confetti didn't fall. There was no golden buzzer. But sometimes, the loudest victories are the quietest ones, the ones built on perseverance rather than spectacle. Backstage, Mateo fell to his knees, overwhelmed. A producer handed him a phone. On the screen, his mother sobbed openly. "Your father would be so proud," she said. Weeks later, the audition clip went viral. Millions watched the moment Simon Cowell stood up for a young Filipino who dared to sing Elvis differently. Messages poured in from around the world, people who said his voice reminded them of loved ones they had lost, of dreams they had abandoned, of hope they needed to find again. Mateo didn't win the entire competition that season. But he won something bigger. He returned home to Cebu not just as a contestant, but as a symbol. Local schools invited him to speak. Young kids who once thought their accents were weaknesses began singing louder. Delivery drivers started posting their own singing videos online. Dreams that once felt too far away suddenly felt possible. And Simon? In a later interview, he admitted, "That audition reminded me why we do this show. Because sometimes, greatness doesn't walk in wearing confidence. Sometimes it walks in carrying responsibility, grief, and quiet determination." Mateo kept his father's old Elvis record. But now, beside it, sat a new frame, him on the AGT stage, eyes closed, singing not to impress, but to connect. If there's something this story proves, it's this: never let where you come from decide how far you can go. And never underestimate a quiet voice, it might be the one that changes everything. If Mateo's journey moved you even a little, take a second right now, like this video so more people can see it. Share it with someone who needs encouragement. And subscribe to the channel for more unforgettable stories that remind us what's possible when courage meets opportunity. Because the next person to shock the world might just be someone who hasn't been heard yet. What if I told you that one ordinary man, with a second-hand suit and a borrowed dream, walked onto the biggest stage in the world and left Simon Cowell completely speechless? Don't skip this one, because the ending will stay with you. And if stories like this inspire you, make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel so you never miss moments that remind us why dreams matter. The backstage hallway of America's Got Talent was colder than Paulo Mendoza expected. At 30 years old, he had faced typhoons in Manila, sleepless nights riding a tricycle to earn extra money, and the quiet ache of watching opportunities slip away, but nothing made his hands shake like this. He wasn't supposed to be here. Paulo grew up in a narrow alley in Quezon City, where laundry lines crossed overhead like tangled spider webs and radios played old American songs through static. His mother loved Elvis Presley. She didn't speak much English, but she sang every word of "Love Me Tender" as if she had written it herself. When Paulo was 7, he would sit beside her on the concrete steps outside their home, listening to her hum while the sun dipped behind crowded rooftops. "You have his soul in your voice," she would tell him. "Not his sound, his soul." But soul didn't pay bills. When Paulo's father fell ill, music became a luxury. Paulo quit college and worked at a small car repair shop. His hands grew rough, permanently stained with oil. Customers sometimes heard him singing while fixing engines, but to him it was just habit, like breathing. Years passed. Responsibilities grew heavier. His father passed away quietly one humid evening, leaving behind hospital debt and a family trying not to fall apart. Paulo stopped singing for a while after that. Music reminded him too much of softer days. One night, during a neighborhood gathering, the power went out. In the darkness, someone jokingly shouted, "Paulo, sing something." There were no microphones, no instruments, just candlelight and neighbors fanning themselves in the heat. Paulo hesitated. Then he sang. "Can't Help Falling in Love." His voice, deeper now, carried pain it hadn't known in childhood. The street fell silent. Even the stray dogs seemed to pause. When he finished, his mother was crying quietly in the corner. A cousin recorded the moment on an old phone and uploaded it. Weeks later, a talent scout saw it. And now here he was. The stage manager gestured. "You're up." The curtain parted. The AGT stage felt enormous, like stepping into another universe. The lights were blinding. The audience, a sea of faces. Simon Cowell glanced at his card. "Paulo Mendoza," he read. "And you're from the Philippines?" "Yes, sir," Paulo replied, his voice steady but soft. "And what do you do for a living?" "I fix cars." A ripple of polite applause. "And today you'll be singing?" "Yes, sir." Elvis Presley. Simon leaned back slightly. The faintest smirk touched his lips. "That's a risky choice." The audience chuckled nervously. Paulo nodded. "I know." The music began, just a piano, simple and exposed. "Love Me Tender." The first note wasn't loud. It didn't try to impress. It was fragile, almost hesitant. Simon's expression didn't change. But then something shifted. Paulo closed his eyes, and suddenly his voice deepened, not in volume, but in emotion. Each word carried longing. Not performance. Not imitation. Memory. "Take me to your heart." The camera cut to the audience. A young woman covered her mouth. An older man wiped his eyes. Simon's posture straightened slightly. Paulo wasn't copying Elvis's iconic style. He wasn't curling his lip or exaggerating vibrato. Instead, he sang the song as if it belonged to his own story, as if he were singing to his father, to his mother, to every version of himself that had almost given up. By the second verse, his confidence grew. The notes became fuller, warmer. The richness of his tone filled every corner of the theater. Simon blinked. The final chorus rose, not dramatically, but with controlled strength that felt earned. "For my darling. I love you." The last note lingered, trembling slightly at the edge, not from weakness, but from feeling. Silence. A long, heavy silence. For one terrifying second, Paulo thought he had failed. Then the audience stood. The applause crashed over him like a wave. He opened his eyes, stunned. Heidi was on her feet. Sophia was clapping enthusiastically. Howie grinned widely. Simon remained seated for a moment. He looked at Paulo not with skepticism now, but with curiosity. And then, slowly, Simon stood. The audience roared even louder. When the cheering settled, Simon leaned forward. "You know," he began carefully, I don't like covers of Elvis songs. Most of the time, they feel like karaoke. Paulo swallowed. But that, Simon continued, wasn't karaoke. That was heartfelt. It felt real. You didn't try to be Elvis. You were Paulo. Paulo's eyes filled instantly. Sophia spoke next. You made it your own. That was beautiful. Heidi added, there's something very honest about you. Howie smiled. You don't look like a superstar. And that's what makes you one. Simon nodded slowly. I was prepared to stop you after 10 seconds. I didn't. That should tell you something. The audience cheered again. Let's vote, Simon said. Yes. Sophia said immediately. Yes. Heidi followed. Absolutely yes, Howie added. Simon paused, building tension. Paulo, this is a big yes. Paulo covered his face, overwhelmed. Backstage, he bent forward, hands on his knees, trying to breathe through the wave of emotion. Across the ocean, in a small living room in Quezon City, his mother cried openly as neighbors crowded around a television. That's my son, she whispered, pride breaking through every syllable. The audition clip exploded online within hours. Comments flooded in from around the world. This gave me chills. I haven't cried like this in years. Simon's standing says it all. But what touched Paulo most wasn't the views, it was the messages from mechanics, drivers, factory workers. People who said, I thought dreams were only for other people. He didn't win the entire competition. But he didn't return home the same man who left. Airports that once felt intimidating now felt like doorways. He began performing at events, sending money home, paying off debts. More importantly, he started speaking at small schools, telling kids, your job today doesn't define your tomorrow. In one interview, Simon admitted, sometimes the people you least expect are the ones who surprise you the most. Paulo reminded me why we keep the door open. Months later, Paulo visited his father's grave. He brought a small speaker and played Elvis softly. Then he sang, not for judges, not for cameras, but for the man who never got to see the stage lights. I made it, Papa, he whispered. The truth is, not everyone who walks onto a big stage wins a trophy. But some win something deeper, belief. And belief spreads. Maybe you're watching this right now thinking your circumstances are too small. Your background too ordinary. Your accent too thick. Your dream too unrealistic. Paulo thought the same. Until one day, he didn't. So before you click away, remember this, talent can be hidden in the most unexpected places. Sometimes behind grease-stained hands. Sometimes behind quiet eyes. Sometimes behind a simple love for a song older than you are. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video so more people can see it. Share it with someone who needs a reminder that their dream still matters. And subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories that prove it's never too late to step onto your stage. Because somewhere out there, another ordinary person is humming a song, not knowing the world is about to listen. Before anything else, picture this, a small man walks onto a giant stage, thousands of eyes on him, and Simon Cowell, the most intimidating judge in the world, leans back, skeptical. He thinks he's seen it all. But what happens next shocks everyone. Trust me, you'll want to watch until the end. And if this story moves you, like this video and subscribe, because moments like these deserve to be shared. Mateo Santos had never imagined being on a stage like this. At 28, he had spent years running errands in Manila, delivering packages on a rusty motorcycle, earning just enough to support his sick mother and younger sister. His days were long, his nights short, and his dreams, quietly tucked away. Music had always been his escape. He would sing Elvis songs while riding through crowded streets, imagining bright lights and applause, but he never thought anyone would ever hear him. Growing up, his father had been a talented musician, playing guitar in a local band. Mateo remembered sitting beside him, watching his fingers dance across the strings as they played Can't Help Falling in Love. His father would smile and say, music is about heart, not fame. When his father passed, the house felt empty. His mother worked tirelessly to make ends meet, and Mateo buried his voice in work. Singing became a memory, a private comfort. But destiny has its way. One day, a tourist recorded Mateo singing Elvis on a crowded street corner. The video went viral. Thousands of people were touched by his voice. "You need to go to AGT," they commented. Mateo laughed nervously, but his little sister took matters into her own hands. She submitted his audition form without telling him. The call came weeks later. He was invited to audition. Heart-pounding, Mateo traveled to the United States. The stage was enormous, the lights blinding, the audience massive. And there sat Simon Cowell, arms folded, eyes piercing. Mateo's knees shook, but he remembered his father's words. "Hello," Simon said, his voice sharp. "What's your name?" "Mateo Santos, sir," he replied. "And where are you from?" "Manila, Philippines." Simon's eyebrow rose slightly. "And you're here to sing Elvis, sir?" A ripple of amusement passed through the audience. Simon smirked. Elvis covers were risky. Many had failed before. But Mateo wasn't trying to be Elvis. He was just Mateo. The music began soft, simple, just a piano. Mateo closed his eyes and let his heart lead the way. Wise men say. The first note was gentle, almost fragile. But it carried a depth that silenced the room. Mateo wasn't performing. He was living every word. Every note told the story of a young man who had faced hardship, loss, and doubt but never gave up. The camera panned over the audience. People were leaning forward, captivated. Simon's arms unfolded slowly. His expression shifted from skepticism to awe. "But I can't help falling in love with you." Mateo's voice rose, not in volume but in emotion. The richness of his tone filled the theater. He poured every memory of his father, every sacrifice of his mother, and every sleepless night delivering packages into the song. By the final note, the room was silent, breathless, hanging on to his every word. And then, the applause exploded. Standing ovation. Judges on their feet. Simon Cowell, usually the hardest to impress, remained seated a moment longer, processing. Then he stood, and the audience cheered louder. "Mateo," Simon began, his voice unusually gentle, "I've heard that song 1,000 times. And I usually dread it. But that was real. You didn't try to be Elvis. You were yourself. And that's why it worked." Mateo's eyes filled with tears. Behind the stage, his mother and sister were watching on a tiny TV back home, crying openly. "Your father would be so proud," his mother whispered. The judges' votes came in. Yes. 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 And Simon's final vote, a resounding yes. Mateo was through. He didn't just impress the audience, he touched hearts worldwide. The video went viral. Messages poured in from people who said his voice reminded them of lost loved ones, childhood memories, and dreams they had abandoned. Mateo didn't win the AGT trophy that season, but he won something bigger: hope, belief, and the reminder that even ordinary people can do extraordinary things. Mateo returned to Manila, not as a delivery driver, but as a symbol. Kids began singing on street corners again. Families posted videos of their loved ones chasing forgotten dreams. Mateo spoke at schools, telling children, "Your circumstances do not define your future. Your heart does." Years later, Mateo visited his father's grave. He played a soft Elvis melody and sang, not for fame, not for applause, but for the man who taught him the power of music. Simon Cowell would later say in an interview, "Some auditions stay with you forever." Mateo's was one of those moments. "It reminded me why we do this show." This story is proof that greatness can emerge from the most unexpected places. That a quiet voice can shake the world. That your dream, no matter how small or hidden, matters. If Mateo's story inspired you, take a second, like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe for more stories that prove dreams are worth chasing. Because the next person to shock the world might be sitting quietly somewhere, waiting for their song.